here's a great way to stress test your pitch
Oh,
to
that's
see if
great.
it's
Yeah.
working. Instead of delivering your pitch, ask somebody that you've already pitched to explain to the other person what you do, right? That is one of the best pieces of feedback.
Ah, congratulations. I'm so excited for you for this next half an hour of this recorded conversation with this professional, uh, engaging man. And you're gonna learn how to get the right story on the right time. Let's go!
Well, that's what this whole podcast is about, isn't it? It's about how do you pitch yourself when somebody asks you the question, what do you do? Or, what's your name? And tell me a little bit about yourself. So, well, you know my name. It's Topher, but I'm the founder of a company called Personify. We are, at our heart, a training and development company, and we specialize in writing award-winning pitches for business owners that need to create clarity and credibility when they tell people about what it is that they do. I've been a professional speaker for the past 30 plus years, written a couple of books on the subject as well. So I'm excited to be here, be a part of this, and I really hope that your viewers get some little nuggets of insight out. I'll do my best. I'll pull out the best stuff I've got. If they don't like this, they're going to hate everything else. But hopefully we'll give Liz one good gym.
Well, you put the bar quite high, super cool. And that is the cool thing. You can teach something or you also do it yourself. And the way you introduce yourself is already captivating for me. And at the same time, I'm very curious. You come across very professionally, very, how can I say it? A warm personality, I would say.
Warm, I'll take. Professional, clearly not. There's very little professionalism in me, as proof by the fact that even though I'm on, I don't even have shoes on, so I don't know that I'm very professional. Clearly, by throwing my foot up on screen.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. And the way you come across is it is not professional. Don't get me wrong. But it's entertaining and captivating. And at the same time, I'm also curious, for the people that are now already whoa, that's super cool and I want that too, yet I don't feel that I'm there at all. Where did your journey start and how did you become so fascinated by this subject?
Oh, okay. I'll share that. But first, because this is all about pitching, I want you to. So I just shared with you my little quick pitch. I want to hear yours as well. So if people ask you, what do you do for a living? What do you tell them?
Of course, what I tell them is that 5 years ago, I was this super enthusiastic entrepreneur with all my great ideas, and I wanted to share it with everyone. And with everyone, I mean my mom, my friends, but also the bus driver. Everybody had to hear it from me. And what I found out is that the more I shared, the less responses I got. Because people at some point also thought, oh, there is she again with all her enthusiastic stories. Yeah. And that actually, and those reactions really had a big effect on me. And I felt that, okay, maybe my ideas aren't that good. And maybe I should not go through with this. And maybe I should actually stop. And I started to doubt myself. But then I found this way of communicating in a way that's not only compelling for myself, but actually for the other person. And not everyone, but the person or the people that actually had to listen to my story because they could learn from it. Not everyone. And that's where I got so fascinated by that it was working for myself that I also wanted to teach others, and especially those extremely outgoing, enthusiastic people just like me who just want to help other people but just didn't find a way of communicating what they know that other people get also enthusiastic by.
Daniel Priestley, the author of Key Person of Influence, has a great phrase for that I'll steal. He calls that the window of listening, right? Which is until you can get the person that you're speaking to open up their window of listening, it's shut, and they're not going to hear you no matter how loud or how fast you talk. And the key is to make sure that they open up that window to where they're not doing that resistance, like, oh, here she comes again. So it's interesting that you were able to pick up on that, by the way, and change your behavior, because most people don't. They just go, well, they're not listening, I'll speak louder, I'll speak faster, and that rarely ever works.
It really doesn't work. And I really like that quote. It's like you don't want to push in the information, but you want to basically, put it on a silver platter so they can pull it into their brain. because that's where like real value
Yeah.
comes. Completely cool quote. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What was the question? I forgot already.
The question was like, okay.
How did I get started in this?
Exactly.
Well, I'll give you the abbreviated version. Otherwise, it'd probably take 40 minutes to ramble on that story. But when I was a youth, I wanted to be a famous rock and roll star. I wanted to get on stage and entertain. And I discovered that unless you're willing to put in the practice, you're not that good of a musician. And so I loved to perform, but I didn't love to practice. But I always had that latent performer in me where I wanted to share and make people smile and laugh to some degree. And then I got into the world of corporate training kind of through a fluke. I was working for a company, and they had a promote from within policy, and there was a opening for a corporate training position. I applied for it, and I got it, and that's where I found out that I had the gift of gab. And I guess if there's anything I do well in life, it's I have the ability of taking really complex thoughts and ideas and paring that down to something very simple and very easy to understand. And I kind of found my flow in that. And I have literally been, if you want to define a professional speaker, somebody who gets paid to speak, I've been doing it literally since I was 19 years old. It's the only thing I know how to do. I'm a one-trick pony.
Yeah, you better do something like one thing really well instead of like 50 things like a bit half, huh? So that's pretty cool. And do you remember that one time when you were 19, it was the first time you were standing there? Like, can you bring us back to that moment?
In fact, what's interesting is in my book, the book on public speaking, I start off by saying that I love seeing the proverbial light switch go on or the light go on when you're speaking to people. You get this as well, right, Laurie? You've done this to where people are listening and they're absorbing, but they're not comprehending, right? And then all of a sudden they get that kind of like that click, that aha moment, and they're like, yeah, now I get it, you know? And I lit up as soon as I saw them light up. And I think that's probably I'm guessing that's what like professors and teachers feel. That's probably what gets them into the business as well, is that I just get such a joy when I see that light bulb go off in people's heads that they really comprehend or understand something. And from then on, I was hooked. Yeah.
Cool. And I can completely understand that, because you can say something, but that's what we just said. You can say a lot of things to other people, but it only gets valuable when they understand it for themselves and they can do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and when that happens, isn't that just like such a rush though? Like when you just see them kind of light up and they go, oh, I get this. And you're like, yeah. Oh, I don't know. For me, that's like, it's one of the best feelings in the world.
Oh, that's
and
super
I
cool.
thoroughly
Now you're
enjoy
helping
it.
others. So first you did it for yourself, and now you're helping others with it. What was the switch point of that for you, that you thought, okay, I want to share this with more people than just me standing in front of people?
Oh, that's a great question. I was like I said, I was a corporate trainer at age 19, and I did that for almost 5 years. And I started getting into self-help and personal development, and started going and seeing all the speakers, and I saw what they were doing. And like, I think a lot of people, how they get into the speaking business is they see somebody else doing it, and they can see the passion that they have for that, and they go, God, I could do that. You know, it's one of those things when you see a really good speaker, Steve Siebold, who is the heir to the Bill Gove speaking franchise, he says that a great speaker, a good speaker, is one that when people see them on stage, they go, wow, they're so good. I wish I was that good on stage. But a great speaker is the one where the people in the audience go, what an easy job this person has, man. Get up and talk? Huh, I could do that, right? Because they make it look so effortless and so easy that everybody in the audience feels they could do it. I think I got bit that way. I watched really great speakers, and I saw them like, this can't be that hard. I could do this, right? I'm already a corporate trainer. Why don't I become a motivational speaker? And I got into that. And then I discovered, much like being a musician, if you really want to be great on stage, you also have to practice. So I gave up the guitar, and instead of playing chords on a guitar neck, I started using my vocal cords and practice.
I really love that, because a lot of people that I talk to and want to be that persuasive communicator or compelling storyteller, they always feel that they have to improvise, because then, you know, it really flows and then it comes from the heart. But that's, at least in my opinion, I also hear it in what you say, is really a big myth. Huh? Like, if the story comes across as practice, then the actually thing is that you did not practice enough. So you're like above the content. Yeah.
Yeah, Zig Ziglar, arguably one of my favorite speakers of all time, he said it best. He said, if your presentation sounds canned, I should do that. I should do it with the Zig Ziglar accent. Let me try it with the Zig Ziglar accent. If your presentation sounds canned, then you haven't canned your presentation. That's my Zig impression. So, but it's true, right? Like, if there's this valley that you have to go through as a speaker, where you memorize, you rehearse, you practice, and it sounds very stilted. It sounds very fake and artificial. But if you practice beyond that and you get to the other side, then what ends up coming out of that is a conversation that sounds so organic and so effortless that the audience feels like you're just making it up off their shoulder. And I think that's where a lot of people get mixed up, as they go, well, I don't want to rehearse it. I just wanted to, I just want to wing it, right? Like, the worst words I think anybody could ever say for a pitching mantra would be, I just wing it. I was like, oh, you can't wing it. It's too valuable to wing. You need to rehearse, but you need to rehearse to such a degree that it sounds like you're winging.
I completely agree. And I also find out that if you practice so many times, it also becomes more funny for yourself, or more like lively, because then you can improvise structurally.
Yeah,
so
correct. Yes. Yeah. That's where the improvisation comes from, is like, if you don't have to remember what you're going to say, you're free to pay attention to the audience, to look at the nonverbal cues. You're free to throw in a little joke here, a little joke there, and then get right back on track. But if you're still winging it, you're trying to think about what to say, never comes off as good.
We're actually on the same page.
Yes, we're on the same page.
And what I also see, I'm curious if you recognize this. There's like sometimes like a 50% of the people, like half of them really want the structure to be perfect. And they're so focused on, like, okay, so how can I structure my conversation?
Mm-hmm.
And then they tell it in a very technical, correct way, and it's very structured, it's very perfect. But then on the other side, you don't completely feel it.
Yeah.
And then on the other side is like people that we just talked about. It's like the authentic ones just want to come across authentic and compelling and real and with the heart out. And then they're so enthusiastic or winging it, that the point sometimes doesn't really come across in that way. Is that something you recognize as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You get on one side of the spectrum, you get the people who want to wing it, and they're just so passionate, they just blah, 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 and they vomit all of their best thinking onto people, and it rarely sticks. But then you get the other people who are so in their head and love jargon and try to think of the most complex way to impress people with their jargon, that they still miss it. Right? I'll share with you a story, Laurie. This was one of my favorite examples. I was at a networking event one time, and I met this person who, when they introduced themselves, they said that they were not cranial. Sorry. They were, I forget the exact term, but I want to say it was something to the effect of, they were an engineer that designed cranial prosthetics. And I was properly intimidated by this person, right? Because I'm thinking, like, what are they designing? What are they building, right? So could you imagine what somebody who builds a cranial prosthetic is? Do you have any idea what they do?
Interesting.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then what I did is I put on, I don't know, this may be for American metaphor, but you might get it. I put on the Joey Tribbiani smile from the TV show Friends. Like, he was kind of that dumb guy that never got a joke, but he would just smile like he did kind of get it, but he didn't. I get my Joey Tribbiani face, and I was just like, oh, that's great. Yeah, and I'm inside, I'm like, I don't know what she's talking about. So we kept talking, and here's what she did. Are you ready for this? She designs wigs. She was a wig designer. And I'm like, why would you say that you're an engineer that designs cranial prosthetics, which nobody knows what that means, right? When you could just say, I make wigs, right? And and then they get it immediately right away. So I always find that the more you can pull away that jargon, the more you can remove that, the better off the client is, and the more comfortable the listener is. Now, this kind of harkens back to what you and I were talking about before we got on camera, by the way. So maybe I'll throw this out if it's okay if I share this with your audience, because I don't know what I can share about
Just
you
go for it.
that you share with me off camera. Can I talk about the nutrition thing? Yeah. So, we were talking about how we both got our start, and one of the things you were saying is that you started, and I apologize if I don't get the right job title, but you were like a nutritionalist or a dietitian, and you were in nutrition and fitness, and then we started talking about how you identified that people once you evolved into speaking, you noticed that people were overly passionate, overly excited, and they would just kind of, throw up all these ideas on people when they weren't really listening. And I drew the analogy. I said, well, when you were a nutritionalist, you would tell people to cut out all the unhealthy foods. But now as a trainer, you're sharing with business people how to cut out all the unhealthy words. And I think that's probably the most unhealthy words people can use in their pitch are those real long, multisyllabic, technical jargon that nobody understands what they mean anyway. So, yeah.
Super cool. And I'm very curious, like for these people, because what I found is like, not everybody is the same. It's not super surprising, obviously. But also like the people that prefer the very structured and the fancy words, it's because of a reason, huh? Like their brain works in a way that is very satisfying. But yet, and that is the interesting thing I think about presenting, it's not always what you find fascinating or how you digest information, but it's more about like how the other person does. Why you're talking.
Well, and to clarify, you mean it's not what the speaker, it's not how it responds with the speaker, it's how it responds with the listener, right? Yeah. And that's hard to get through to people, right? Because they want to say what makes sense to them, not necessarily what makes the sense to somebody else. And that's hard. In fact, I was not on the phone. I was in a conversation here in the studio with a client of mine who is a software development engineer, right? So very brilliant, very technical, and he was trying to describe what it is that he does. And I kept going back to him going, I don't understand that. And finally I got him to the point where I said, if people's business was a river, you go in and you remove the big boulders which are blocking the water so it flows effortlessly and smoothly. And he goes, yeah, that's it. I'm like, I think people would rather hear a metaphor about what you do than, because I didn't understand Azure this and Azure that. And I don't know, I didn't even understand half the words that he was saying. So, but it's hard, right? Because he feels very comfortable with that. That's what he wants to say, but it's not about that.
As a speaker, you also just really want to share it because it's so interesting. But that's the thing, and I'm very curious what your tip would be to these people. Like, how can a person who, and I know some of them are listening right now, is like, I like my structure. I like to be sure that I don't miss any information. What would your biggest tip be for those people?
I think probably the number one thing would be this. Understand what the outcome is of the pitch you're delivering when you're delivering it, and only achieve that outcome. So, for example, like I focus on 5 main pitches. What I call the party pitch, or a social pitch, or an elevator pitch, something like that, like with a quick pitch. Sorry, I've just confused my own self. So the first one is what I call the quick pitch. A lot of people call it the elevator pitch. The second one is what I call the party pitch or a social pitch, right? That's where you've got your drink in hand and you're walking up to people and go, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself, right? So it's not as structured. There can be kind of a ping pong back and forth, and it's casual. Apparently, this is my glass of water. That's what I was trying to demonstrate there. And I just revealed to everybody that I have a skanky phone with a really bad, I really need to get a new one. It's very old. Anyway, then there's the sales pitch. Then there's the investor pitch, and then you also have what I refer to as a media pitch, which is how do you pitch to television, radio to get on shows. And each one of those has a very specific but different outcome, right? The elevator pitch is to get that person to say, tell me more. The social pitch is to get that person to say, you need to meet so-and-so, or I need to speak with you, right? The sales pitch is to get them to give you money. The investor pitch is to get them to become a partner. The media pitch is to get them on TV. And because they have different outcomes, you need to communicate different elements with that as well. And what ends up happening, I see, especially in the elevator pitch and in the party pitch, is they want to share with them everything they do. that's more of a sales pitch, right? Not a party pitch. The party pitch, you just need to give them enough information to where they say, let's grab a coffee, or let's get together, or let me introduce you to Sam or Jane or something like that. And often, if you give them too much information in a party pitch, what do, Laurie? They just walk away, right? They go to somebody else. Like, it was nice meeting you. I'm going to go. I just saw somebody I recognize, and then they run off to the side. So if you understand what the purpose of the pitch is, you might be a little bit more willing to reserve and hold back all of the great stuff that you do for the sales pitch and just get them curious, get them interested. I always say a party pitch
really cool
creates more questions than it answers.
And what I like about the fact that you have multiple basically focuses of your presentations is also that because public speaking or presenting, what I hear a lot from people is it associates a stage. You standing in a big football stadium talking to I don't know how many thousand people, but in reality, and that's hundreds of thousands, like maybe even a broadcast live on TV, all America, everyone. But the reality, and that's very cool what you're saying, is that you do it all the time. Yeah. We do it right now. You do actually do it on the bus stop. You do actually do it to your mom and your friends. But it's all in a different way. And when you start to see how to utilize your information in a way that's compelling for every single context, then it becomes more fun because you get the reaction from people that they're actually understanding what you're saying in the situation that it's appropriate for, if that makes sense.
Yep. I tried. The analogy that I use is much like a musician has a song list, right? And they have all of these different songs, and they know that if they play all of their songs in one order, it creates a certain effect with the audience. But if they mix it up and put it in a different order, it creates a different energy, right? Like you know, like if you were to do all of your ballads right when you open up your set, you're going to put the audience to sleep. So you start off with something, but you don't want to start off with the most dynamic, overbearing one because they're not hyped up yet enough for that, right? So you find a medium way and then you kind of build up, and then once it's up enough, then you go down to a ballad so they can kind of breathe and relax. And a pitch is the same way, right? I have my song list. I know here's what I say if this is the outcome I'm trying to create. Here's what I say if this is the outcome. And then I can, because each one of my little mini pitches are independent thoughts in and of themselves, they all work independent on their own, so I can kind of mix and match and change them up based upon the effect that I'm going. That only takes and works if you practice and you memorize to such a degree that it doesn't sound like you're memorizing. And that's I think that's the biggest challenge I face with my clients, like just getting them to put in the time. What about you?
A lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs are so busy with what they do that the presentation is just telling them what they do. And that's the thing we talked about already, is that they don't memorize it. So then it's just like a storm of words and information, and most of the time it's actually also based on the previous call they had before, because they're just like and then it's a lot of information. But what I also found, and that is actually also based on like the analogy that you just used, like the songs that you're playing, like in your life you also have specific events of stories, like you just told a couple of them. You were talking about your phone that has like a scratch background. You talked about the meeting you had with a client, like all these things that already happened to you in real life that you can actually utilize and use to make a point. And that's what I find very fascinating. So a lot of people sometimes think is that if they have a presentation or they have to tell about their business, they have to block 3 hours in their agenda to completely create the structure and build it from scratch and think about all the words that they have to say. While in reality, at least for me, I'm very curious about what you think of it after, but that it's basically just a playlist of songs from stories that you already had in your life. And if you think about it like this, I sometimes say it like you can practice a presentation in the bar while you're drinking a beer with a friend. Because it's all about telling stories. And what you just did now, I hope you also do that with your friends, because it's highly entertaining. And it doesn't have to be this boring situation where you just sit behind your desk and craft your scripts, basically.
Actually, I do actually enjoy sitting down and scripting things down. I do my best to get my clients to do it, knowing full well that most of them won't. But you're absolutely right. You know, the best time to practice your pitch is with your friends and your family, or your dog. In my case, I talk to my dog all the time. She's asleep right down here. But the interesting thing is most business owners will sit there and go, I don't have time to practice. I don't have time to practice. So I'm just going to, I wing it and I pitch to my clients. And I always tell them that. I've just made a video about this. Interesting, Laurie. I said that a true professional cares enough about their customers that they are willing to give them the best performance they can. And if you're not practicing in private, then you're not delivering a performance in public. What you're delivering is a practice session. And let me tell you, your customers deserve more than a practice session. They deserve a full-on rehearsed performance that sounds so effortless and so natural. They're just like a professional musician that gets up there and just goes up and down on the guitar. Yeah, like for every musician who can sit there and run up and down the guitar neck and look at the audience and flirt with them and play with them and have a lot of fun, the only reason they could do that is because they've done this so many times in private that they don't have to think about it.
Combined.
That's
like
the key.
On one hand, you don't have to, block all the evenings in your week to make this perfect script, but it needs to be a balance of both that. And then also, I'm very curious how you see that too. It's like some of my clients, they really are enthusiastic about the script. I personally, but that's more the way I learn. It's very hard for me to really create a script, but I do go with bullet points. And at some point, I know exactly what I mean with this bullet point, and I practice a bullet point over and over again, but verbally instead of writing it down, because that's my personal preference.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I think there's probably two schools. The one thing that I've discovered is that I'm old enough to know now that there's more than one way to do something, right? The term actually is called equifinality, which is that there's multiple ways to get to the same final outcome. I, for one, love to script things out word for word. In fact, on a professional keynote, not only do I script it out word for word, but I also block out where I stand on stage, what facial expressions I use. I mean, I really script it out. And then I get it to such a point where then I can throw away the script and I have my highlights and my bullet points. That just works for me. For people that like you, that doesn't work for them, I always tell them, I say, it's more about making sure that you don't, it's not so much the words that you say that matter as much as the message that you communicate. And at some point in time, you have to rehearse practicing the message. Whether or not you're rehearsing the words, that's secondary. It's my preference, but at least rehearse the message that you're trying to say. It could come out differently every single time, but you need to know what are your highlights, what are your points, what are your messages, and what's the best way to communicate
your presentation, because otherwise you get lost and the audience will get lost. The only thing, though, that I always script is the beginning and the end, because I always feel like at least a lot of people I speak to are also besides like the preparation and the perfect script or the bullet points, whatever they prefer, it's also a bit of a terrifying feeling to stand there while people are watching you. It's like one person or 10 or 100, that doesn't matter. People are watching you and you have to perform. And what I always feel is that if you know by heart, and by heart I mean if you wake up in an emergency situation and someone asks, what's your first two lines? You know it. And when you have the confidence that the first two lines or the 2 minutes are just perfectly prepared, then at some point you have the confidence at the moment and you just, you can do just the rest in your way. And the end the same. Like the worst thing is like, okay, that was it. you wanted to be,
by the way, I agree 100%. In fact, I'll give your viewers a great tip on how to get that opening and how to get that closing nailed. But the one thing, speaking to that closing specifically, I do think that you need to know how you end your pitch. And the importance for that is this. If you haven't rehearsed how you end your pitch, you won't know when you're done. And that's where people get in trouble because they just keep on talking. They just keep on rambling. They're like, I'm not sure exactly where I'm supposed to stop. So I'm just going to keep talking until I figure out and they just keep going on and on and on. And it's way too long. But if you know what is that last line in your pitch that lets your brain know, shut up and listen, then you know how to finish that. Here's a great tip on how to rehearse the beginning and the ending and get it down perfectly. Sign up for or register for some sort of a business conference where you have a booth, right? And set up your booth. I don't even care if it's just the table that they provide and a business cards. That would be kind of boring, and you're going to have a hard time getting people to stop by. You need to make it look good, right? But if you go to a business conference and you set up your table and you're there to meet people, you can practice your pitch 200, 300, 400 times in a day. And by the end of that day, you'll be so sick of hearing your own pitch because you've delivered it to every single person that's walking by that you will begin to know, oh, that worked, that didn't, cut that out, add this. And it's one of the best ways to make sure that your pitch gets developed and is performed well is to just go to a business conference
I love that actually.
and deliver your pitch as many times as you can to people that are walking by. And it's a great way to practice without practicing.
The whole idea of what you're just presenting is so interesting because for a couple of months I'm living now as a digital nomad, and last month I was actually in a place in Tenerife, super beautiful, like on one side the beach and the sea, on one side the mountains, incredible place. And I lived there with around 20 people because I didn't want to be alone. It was like a co-working, co-living situation, super interesting. And every time there were new people coming in the house, and every time they were like, hey, so Laurie, what do you do? And in the beginning, I was just telling this one story, and it developed like constantly. And the funny thing about this was that on day one, I met a girl, and she asked me the same question, and I replied in my way of doing it at that moment. And then we were living together for a month, and then 2 weeks later, she overheard my conversation with someone else doing the exact same or answering the exact same question. And then she told me in the end, like, wow, that answer really changed. And I was like, yeah, it's because I practice it all the time and I get feedback and I feel what works and what doesn't, what resonates with them and what doesn't. Because for me, a specific word means something, but for someone else, it changed completely. So that's the interesting thing.
Yeah. Laurie, here's a cool one for your viewers. Here's a great way to stress test your pitch to see if it's working. Instead of delivering your pitch, ask somebody that you've already pitched to explain to the other person what you do, right? That is one of the best pieces of feedback because if you can say, Tom, explain to Sam a little bit what I do. I want to see if I did a good job. Right? You can be very transparent about it. And I will tell you that sometimes that can be very alarming and very eye-opening when you hear somebody else's interpretation of what you do
that's
compared to what you would actually communicate yourself. And it's really good feedback for your viewers to know. You'll know you're on the mark when what you say is kind of the same thing that they would have said.
Like, wow, that's spot on. I'm so going to steal that. And someone right here is listening. And they're like, okay, I'm pumped.
Okay.
I am this over-enthusiastic entrepreneur. I do want my business presentation or my business explanation to come across in a way. I got this cool tips. What should I do first? What is like the first step that I should take right now, even maybe like literally right now, to come to the next level that they know they can be?
I would say write it out. Write out what it is that you do. And just see if it makes sense on paper, because like just the process, the mind-brain integration of being able to write out what it is that you do, handwrite it, even more so than typing it, like handwriting it, there's some level of an integration there to where if you handwrite out your pitch, specifically what it is that you do, I would say two things. Just that alone will make you more prepared the next time you go deliver your pitch. You will have it ingrained in your mind and your body a little bit better. But then also, when you do write it out, you start to realize how much of it is fluff that is unnecessary, and you can start crossing some of the stuff off. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Laurie, if you know this one, but I think it was Mark Twain once who said, I apologize for writing such a lengthy letter. I didn't have time to write a shorter one. And I think that that's really a profound way of saying it's easy to ramble on and on forever, but it's hard to just give all of those words a diet to where it's just exactly what you need. And when you write it out, you'll tend to, like if you get writer's cramp, your pitch is way too long, right? So you need to be able to write it a lot shorter.
Great.
Thank you for the opportunity to share some of my ideas with your crew as well. Appreciate you.
Whoa, I hope you learn as much as I did, because even when I'm into this subject, I always take notes on conversations because we can only learn from that. And that's what I want to invite you to do as well. Put in the comments what you like best, because if you write it down, you anchor it in for yourself as well. And while you do that, put on a like and subscribe to the channel because there's way more to come.